everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Podcast. Today, I'm here with someone who is clearly about to become my new friend, Mr. Jack Mahoney, who's joining us from National Credit Adjusters. How you doing today, Jack?
I'm doing great, Adam. Thanks.
I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights with us today. Data analytics has become a huge part of the debt collection industry in trying to predict and understand from large data sets. And from my understanding and from our introduction, that's kind of your area of expertise, being able to query in and understand or answer questions for executives based on the data sets within the organization. Can't wait to dig into that. But before we jump into all of that, could you maybe tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Yeah, sure. I was born and raised in Hutchinson, Kansas. That's where our corporate office at NCA resides. I spent a few years in Oklahoma. That's where I met my wife of now 32 years. Started a family at a young age and found myself really in need of some financial support, right? And so I found in Hutchinson a place called Midland Credit Management where I started in debt collections. It was meant to be kind of a short-term thing, right? I didn't intend to stay there too awfully long. But about 3 decades later, here I am, still in the industry. Worn a lot of hats over the years. I've been from the collection floor to operations management to the role I play today in analytics, which is by far the best part of this journey that I've had. I love doing that job. I could take that, really that practical experience, industry knowledge, and apply it to the business requirements, the challenges that we face today. It's been a lot of fun and look forward to continuing on for another decade.
That's fantastic. I can clearly tell that we are going to be friends. That is a great approach to it. And there's really no better way to be able to analyze a business or a business requirement than to have actually done the job. And for those people that have done all of these different roles throughout an organization, I mean, those are always your most powerful thinkers. And then when you start layering the data on top of it, what an incredible opportunity. But for anyone who's not familiar with National Credit Adjusters, could you tell everyone a little bit about the organization and what you do there?
Sure. NCA is a company that's been around since 2001. That's when I started with the company, shortly after it opens its doors. NCA is a debt buyer in the space. So we go out and we find the receivables that we believe we can turn a profit on and bring those in-house to feed to our collection staff. That's kind of, in a nutshell, what NCA does. And I'm the director of analytics here at the company. So I'm responsible for really bringing out those data insights from the millions and millions of records of data history that we have to help drive performance in the company and gain efficiencies where we can.
Fair enough. So speaking of those efficiencies, as someone who has done all the jobs and worked in analytics, the world has changed pretty significantly. When I was still brokering in the, let's call it the early 2000s into the 2010s, the world was driven by spreadsheets. It was driven by pivot tables, and we were running stratifications of a file to try and understand what that data set, really looked like, because you got a million records. You can't really go and look at individual accounts and learn something. You have to be able to categorize group in order to understand. But I can imagine in the last 15 years that the technology being used has changed pretty dramatically. Although I know you're a spreadsheet wizard as well, what kind of tool sets have you started to deploy or utilize in order to really get your hands around this volume of data?
Yeah, I mean, it did start with Excel, right? It all goes back to Excel. I can still remember the day that I learned about pivot tables. It was eye-opening, right? It made
Absolutely
things just so much
changed my life.
Easier. It was fantastic. And then it progressed into using Excel in a little bigger way, right? Learning how to use VBA to control automation and do a lot with that, along with Microsoft's Access product for database use. But really that progressed into using a tool that we use on a regular daily basis throughout the entire organization. And, it's our Click analytics tool. Folks aren't familiar with Click. It's similar to Tableau, if you know what Tableau is.
Yeah. All right. That actually is a good parallel for me.
So it's in that area, but Click and its Click Cloud platform really allows us to do a lot, right? We can bring in data sources from all kinds of areas, whether it's cloud-based storage areas, on-prem storage areas, and just really bring that data together so that we can create our wonderful dashboards. It's going to give us a lot of insight. I know our management team uses our call center analysis application on a daily basis. It updates basically in real time so they can see how the performance of their account managers are doing throughout the day. Very key information, allows them to not only kind of see in real time how they're performing right then and there, but also look at some history to say, hey, here's an area where maybe you can make some improvements and get your numbers looking a little bit better.
So are you looking for like building out trending information to try and understand how things are performing over time, and then kind of working your way back through the data to start looking for strategic opportunities? So I guess let me ask it in this way. Are you starting from a problem that you need to solve, or is it more of a data exploration, or do you get an opportunity to do both?
There's generally both, right? There's times where we're going to see what we have in the data, explore that, and find some insight that we then build out into a dashboard or information that can be used. But a lot of times we have a question that gets posed, a business question that needs to be answered. And when we hear that question, we ingest it and then start going down the path of how can we answer that question. And usually kind of start with, what does the end result need to be? And then let's build towards that end result, right? So for example, if the end result needs to be, how can we improve our promise rate, right? The conversion rate on the telephone. We might go and look at the data to get insight on, are we talking to enough individuals to create the promise conversion rate that we intend to have? And if we are, that's fantastic. Where else do we need to look in order to make those changes to impact that conversion rate? If there is something in that RPC rate, right, the right party contact, that's a little on the lower side, then we can go back and look at, well, what are we building in? What are we delivering to the account manager? What can we change there to make a difference in how they are receiving those calls and the amount of people that they're talking to? Because when it comes to phone conversations, phone collections, it's all about how many people can we get on the phone and give that opportunity for our team.
Very interesting. And as you've moved into digital communications as well, I can imagine that having an analytical infrastructure sitting behind that would help you to refine content, scripting, and really drive forward some of those performance-related metrics.
Yeah. On the digital side, it's something that, I feel like we're just really getting into on a little deeper, right? In our industry, we're, as anyone knows who's in this industry, we are regulated. And so we've got to follow a lot of regulations and be very compliant, which is fantastic. We'll make sure that happens, but it does handcuff us a little bit on how far we can go on the digital side. So we're doing everything that we can to progress and get better into that. And as we do, we're making sure that we're getting in that information, retaining that data so we can use that for insights down the road and make better decisions. Because ultimately, it's we haven't talked about modeling yet, but I'll just go there real quick.
That's the next question, so we can jump right into it.
Let's do it. So we have a servicing score, which is a predictive model using some machine learning with all of our historical data that helps us understand where we should focus our attention. It breaks it up into a decile. So 1 through 10, 10 being the best possible outcome, 1 being not great. Right. Don't put
Is this a probability score? So you're thinking about it in terms of probability of engagement or collection?
It essentially is, right? We just put a numeric value to it to make it easier to understand. So we'll want to put a lot of effort into those higher scoring values, those say 6 through 10s, make sure that we're doing what we can to get those folks on the phone or get a marketing information out to them. And it might be on a little bit of a higher cost engagement. The ones that are on the lower side, the 1s, the 2s, maybe in 3s and 4s and 5s, we'll still want to apply some effort, just not as much as the higher value. And we'll want to try to do that at a lower cost, which is really where that digital aspect comes into play. So if we can send a text or an email at a few pennies versus a phone call or an engagement that way that gets a little more costly, we'll certainly do that on that lower value product, because we know that the conversion rates, even the contact rates on those are going to be on the lower side.
looking at those probabilities or the propensity for one of these consumers to pay and really being able to hone it in based on the results of your own organization is impressive. There's a lot of organizations out there selling scoring, and sure, some of it has some predictive attributes to it, but being able to understand from your own data set. Now, in order to be able to, you mentioned the machine learning in the models as well. So with clicks, that's kind of your data lake, and then you're able to run models over that data set. Is that kind of how I should be thinking about it?
Yeah, on the click side of things, they do have a product that is using machine learning, AutoML, which makes it pretty straightforward to really bring the data together. I mean, really, the most difficult part in running this stuff is deciding which features, which sets of data, how to create the data set that goes into the model itself. Once we can get that piece figured out and feed it in, then we can push a few buttons really and see what it can produce for us. It does still take some, kind of a look in order to decide which of these models is going to fit best, if any. Doesn't always work out that it is great. It's very important to make that distinction that if this isn't something that's going to fit well, we're going to force it in and say it's a model, let's use it. If it's not a good fit, not a good model, it's going to potentially do more harm than good. So we've got to make sure that it's going to test it, make sure it's going to do what exactly we need it to do.
So as you start to look at kind of experimenting with AI models and testing and trying these things, I'm going to go back to my original question, say, like, are you looking at those models as an exploratory, like, okay, let me put together a data set, try and run some models on top of it, or do you generally setting out on that exploration path with a particular, let's say, solution in mind? I've got a particular problem that I'm trying to resolve, and now I'm going to try and find the model that fits that, or is it, okay, I've got a data lake, like, what can I find in the data lake?
It's really going to be, here's a target. I'm trying to get to this target. In one of our models is in pre-purchase evaluation. So we need to take a look at a very limited data set of a file that we want to potentially purchase and load into our system for collections. Obviously, we want it to be a performing portfolio. We want to be able to get our return on it. And so we've trained up a model that will essentially use a target, which is a predictive payer target, to say that there's a reasonable probability that based on the information we have, this consumer will pay us within the first year of collections. And then we can use that information to then compile within that data set the number of payers and the potential of liquidation, potential of cash gain for that portfolio to then value it, right? To then give it a price that we could pay to where we feel that we could be successful. Hopefully that helps to answer that.
No, it does. It absolutely does. It sounds like you're setting off with a particular target and saying,
Yes.
okay, I've got this data set. I'm trying to solve for X, Y, or Z. And you may not necessarily know what that result is going to be, right? As you start down that exploratory path, as you've kind of started playing with some of these models, have you had any aha moments where you just went, oh my God, that was completely counterintuitive, but the data says it's X and I really thought it was going to be Y?
There's little things always that happen in that context. I can't think of a moment where it was just real eye-opening time, but as we continue to go down the path of using this more and more, I know we're going to run into that. It's certainly going to happen. We've got enough data we're always going to get surprised by it. I know one of the things that we intend to do in the future is right now, a lot of the models we are running it, getting information, we're applying it to decisions and driving the company. But we want to get a little more real time, right? And use this modeling to help make decisions in a real time fashion while we have the consumer on the phone. If maybe it could tell something to the effect of, look, if I'm able to make this sort of payment or do this sort of arrangement, is that something that could work? And we could plug that in and the model would give us an idea of whether or not that would be feasible for this particular consumer profile. I think once we go down that path, that's when we're going to have those, okay, I didn't think that was going to be the outcome, but there it is.
I agree. I've had a few of those moments as I've started digging into the data for my own organizations and just trying to understand the types of content that we create, how frequently we create which types of content, what kind of results we're seeing based on a variety of different variables variables, but you must live in a world of variables. Every problem in front of you has got all of these different variables that you're trying to solve for. What kind of approach do you generally take to a new problem? Somebody comes into your office, knock, knock, knock on the door. Hey, Jack, I need to understand X, Y, or Z. How's your mind frame around trying to solve a problem?
Sure. And that happens quite a bit. And that's what we're here to do is solve problems. So that's the fun of the job. I think when generally speaking, when somebody comes in with a business question or a problem that needs to be answered, it comes back to that. I like to figure out, because I got to make sure we understand all of their parts and pieces to that question. Sometimes it might be one sentence, but it really should be a whole paragraph, right? Because we need to build that framework out. But I want to understand, what is their end result. Let's say they're asking for a particular report on some set of data. I'd want to know exactly what structure would you like this to be in, right? What information do we need to resolve? Is it just this one question that you're trying to answer, or is it more? Well, let's make sure that we put that in that report. So we kind of start with a vision of what the end result needs to be, work our way backward into what steps need to be taken in order to make that end result happen. That way we know exactly what data we need to draw from and how to transform that data into the insights that they really need to have within that report, if that's the case.
It sounds like you're starting with a success criteria.
Yes.
Meaning that, okay, I understand your problem. What does success look like? I find that to be a great way to start approaching literally any problem in an organization. If I'm going to do this experiment, if I'm going to try and solve something new, start by determining, what does success actually look like, right? Because It's real hard to get somewhere if you don't know where you're trying to arrive. So having a destination in place and then being able to categorize the data sets that might be needed in order to resolve that problem seems like a pretty logical approach to resolution. As a team, do you have a team of people that you're working with, or are you kind of lone wolf working your way through some of the data analytical problems, challenges, really?
Yeah. I mean, for a long time, I was the only one in the analytics area. But over the past few years, we've started to build out a team. So we do have 3 on staff in the analytics area here today. So it's definitely a team effort at this point to get all the questions answered and get everything out there that this organization needs.
Well, if there's one thing that a room full of executives has, it's questions. And it doesn't matter what organization you're in. And I have yet to meet the IT team on Earth that has enough bandwidth to take on the next project. So I think it's great that you guys have a team of people that are focused on such a mission critical item. So much of decision making at this point in the industry is driven based on the data sets. And those organizations that are not empowering leadership with appropriate data sets, and not only just the data, but the visualization and interpretation of what is being found in the data. And it sounds like Clicks is kind of like a Tableau or a Power BI in terms of being able to visualize. Have you found there to be any challenges specific to the industry about visualizing some of these larger data sets?
It really comes back to, what do we want to see? The challenge is always just ensuring that we have the back-end data organized in a way that we can make use of it, right? It's not always, it's a little messy sometimes.
Structured versus unstructured data, sure.
Yeah. So we can, generally speaking, bring that information together in a way to where we can make use of it and really get it out there in the hands of the end users that need it. It's one of those things that we know that bringing this information to the table is going to provide that insight that's really required to energize the company and give us what we need to be successful. And that's really what it's all about.
What's your favorite part of the process? Like, what's your favorite part of this job, this particular role at NCA?
It's answering questions. I'm the type of guy who, if you pose a question to me, maybe once, I don't know. I'm not sure that I've ever said, no, I can't do that, right? I'm going to find a way. I'm going to find a way to answer this question. And it generally happens. So that's what I love about doing. I just love problem solving and getting out there and digging into information that provides that insight and it gets the person what they need.
And that, I think, is why we are going to be long-term friends. I really like that approach. It's not easy to be the guy with the answers and to have to go answer some questions that are maybe sometimes impossible to really answer. And for me, everything comes down to a degree of certainty, right? What's my confidence in this result? And I think going back to, college and thinking about statistics, everything was a standard deviation from the norm. And I think my brain just started thinking about it in that format and being able to normalize the outliers and get a better understanding of what that real data set looked like. Because when you start plotting these things that are all over the place, you really can start to find some correlations, even when there are offsets and outliers. Well, with 1 million records, it's not like you can drop that into a spreadsheet and go back to your core. And a lot of people in your role immediately want to go back to their comfort zone. Like, I want my Excel safety blanket and I want to be able to get in there and see it. But there becomes a limitation on just the volume of data that I can't stratify it in that format anymore. Have you had I have those moments all the time. Have you had any of those moments where you're like, okay, now I'm starting to get out into all of this new technology, but feeling that need to kind of come back and stick to some fundamentals in which is your source of truth?
Oh, sure. There's always times where, having the data all aggregated together and everything, that's great. And we need that. But once in a while, I just want to throw it into the Excel workbook and just work with it there. The Excel can hold up to 1 million records now, so I can do quite a bit with that. I do try to stay away from it, but, it's handy.
How fast does Excel run with 1 million records? I've never tried.
Depends on how many calculations you got going on. It can run to the point of crashing if you're not careful.
Fair statement. That's awesome. I honestly did not even know that. I've been using Google Sheets a lot lately for my business just because we kind of switched over to a Google shop. And for whatever reason, the Microsoft products just don't run well on my Macs. No matter how native they try to make it, I feel like that's still just going to be a problem into the future. But Jack, man, this has been a great conversation. I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing some insights from the world of data and data analytics for the debt collection industry. This has been great. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask Jack or myself, you can leave those in the comments below on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. Or if you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully I can get Jack at least back one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, Jack, thank you so much for your insights today. I really do appreciate you.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate your time and attention today as well. We'll see y'all again soon. Bye, everyone.